Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Ag Forecast video for South America brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I want to look back at the second half of December and the very beginning of January here, looking at satellite dry precipitation. So this is total accumulated precipitation. And one of the things the models did a really good job at forecasting was this whole region in through here was forecast to be quite wet. And it verified. We saw a lot of this area picking up better than 10, in some places almost 20 inches of rainfall. And that's produced some flooding over in this part of eastern Brazil. The regions that have been drier, in fact, many locations picking up less than a half of an inch of rainfall have kind of centered along the Paraná River right in through here, which kind of snakes into this part of Argentina. There have been a few places during that time period where there's been some heavier precipitation. For example, this region in southern Argentina, growing areas bordering here on Buenos Aires province. But there's a lot of areas in through here that have been quite dry. Now, how well did the models forecast it? Well, let me go back to the beginning of December and show you. They had picked up on this pattern really well early on, showing that drier bias and wetter here, as we saw, and wetter to the north. So I have to say the models did a fantastic job kind of finding the intersection between the La Nina, which was peaking in late December, and what was going on with the MJO transition. And we'll come back to that in just a few seconds. But a few more details to kind of get us up to speed on what's going on there. First, I want to show you the Standard Precipitation Index. This is a drought severity monitor, which comes from the CHIRPS data set. And you can see here the levels of drought we're experiencing. For example, in very far southern Mato Grosso do Sul, Sao Paulo, this would be Paraná, Santa Catarina, and Rio Grande do Sul. Some of those locations, according to this data set, are having some of the driest weather on record throughout that region. I've heard some reports about local kind of declarations of disaster due to drought and very, very low river levels. We'll look at those in just a few seconds. Another site I like to visit, this would be the one from World Ag Weather. And if you come up here, look in Brazil, notice over the last 60 days in Mato Grosso, that's north, there's a surplus of rainfall. Go to the east to Goiás. Again, just a very small deficit compared to average. But it's south where the troubles start to show up. First, Mato Grosso do Sul. Now we're looking at about 4.5 inch deficit there in total precipitation. Going south of there to Paraná, we're now looking at nearly an 8.5 inch deficit in total precipitation there, even despite some recent rains, still a major deficit. And then down to Rio Grande do Sul, where there is an 8 inch deficit in that area. So the drought is clearly farther to the south. We can see this showing up well on the satellite-based observations of root zone soil moisture. That region of southern Brazil getting into Argentina showing up very, very dry. And as I did last time, I would like to show you the current state of the Paraná River. So let's go take a look at it here. Just one of the gauges here, again, showing us well below the lowest levels recorded. So this is well below the average, showing very dry conditions at every one of these Paraná River gauges here. Now, since we're talking about this region, I want to look at it from satellite in two other ways. And we're going to do that first by looking at an NDVI image. Now, focus on the color bar. The NDVI values, when they're way over here on the spectrum, that would be very high NDVI values, very healthy looking vegetation from space. Basically, the cooler the color gets, the worse it looks from space. And as we take a look here, we cannot use this metric up here in Brazil's northern growing areas. And the reason why is cloud cover contamination. So don't look at this thinking there's bad vegetation. We just haven't seen the ground in a while when the satellite passes over. What I'm focused on is this region right in through here. Sao Paulo, southern Mato Grosso do Sul, and this region of Paraná, which comes on the Paraná River. You see Rio Grande do Sul. You then see where the Paraná River comes into Argentina. Uruguay showing up with a lot of these cooler colors. Same thing for Argentina. So let's look at this. I'm going to come right into this area and show you what we're talking about there. Because where Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul come together, this region, if we just keep zooming in, see the river there? This is some very fertile ground. Now you start to see all the fields that are in this area. So when I show you these bluer colors here, or these cooler colors, that represents a region that's been drought stressed. If we come down here, I'm going to show you one other place in Argentina, because some of the biggest producing areas in Argentina are just to the east of Cordoba. We don't see a lot of, well, these bright colors into that area. Come back to our map, let's zoom back out here, slide down the Paraná River, and come over toward Cordoba, which is here. This is not on the Paraná River. Again, it's over in the west. You can see that it is just on the outskirts of Cordoba that we have our very productive land. Look at all these farm fields in this area. And again, that's a region that we're just not seeing the high NDVI values. So I'm concerned about that area. Now, this evening, I'm going to use primarily the website from weatherbell.com because my own site, I have a security certificate that expired. I got to get it fixed. So what you've got here is, this is the forecast for now through the next week. And we do have better rains temporarily coming in through this area, and we're still wet in the north. But drier into Argentina is still the forecast. Now, why are we starting to see a little bit better rain in this area? Now, let's talk about it. First, I think it has a lot to do with what the MJO is doing over in the Pacific. We're losing it. We're losing its strong signal in this area. All right, the subsidence over the Indian Ocean is relatively gone. And what that did, remember, before we went into kind of the Christmas New Year holiday, was it produced strong upper level rising motion here and then subsidence there. So that's why this was dry while here was so wet. Well, now we have a much broader area of upper level ascent, which means we don't have this strong convergence in the flow where I just kind of scribbled there. So we're able to expand that precipitation a bit farther to the south. And you can see it as I play forward on the 12Z run today. You see, getting into the day on Tuesday and then through Wednesday, there's just better chances of scattered storms in here on the tail end of a front, right in through there. But as we move forward in this forecast, January 5th, 6th, 7th, and now the 8th, do you see how higher pressure came back into the region? And therefore it goes drier after the next couple of days where there's going to be some good storm activity. But if you keep an eye on one region, I'd have to say it's going to be this area that throughout much of the next 7 to 10 days is drier. There's better chances at scattered storms north and then very wet north of that. So we look out here the next week, and that's what we see. And then in week 2, this area stays wet, and that includes Mato Grosso do Sul into Sao Paulo. But into southern Paraná, Rio Grande do Sul, and Argentina, those areas continue to show up in the week 2 as drier. And it's not just the European model that's picking up on that. The GFS is also seeing that. Wetter in this area, drier farther to the south. Now, the drier conditions forecast to be north would be welcomed given the harvest efforts going on in that area. It had been extremely wet in this area up to this point. Now, as we look longer term, let's go take a look at the big factor. First, I think it's going to have a lot to do with the fact that this La Nina, which had been so strong pushing out here, has begun to fade. It's become more east-focused, which means we're getting our coolest waters here near Niño region 1+2. Now, we know historically that in the month of January, Niño 1+2 tends to favor slightly drier conditions in southern Brazil and Argentina. These correlations are not strong. That's why you need the MJO to be timed with this. But as a result of the MJO not working in concert to make this area super dry, let me show you the newest long-range forecast. So this just came out. Let's go over to the weeklies. In South America, let me get you a different view here of 30-day precip. You see, if I play this out, let's just go here. Mid-January through mid-February. Do you see how there's better moisture coming back to this area? We're drier farther to the north. You see, this was what we discussed at the end of December. The models gave me a clue that I kind of bit into that said I didn't think that the drier conditions were going to continue throughout the end of January. I thought we were going to break about mid-month, and that seems to be what we're going to get. So I kind of got lucky with that forecast picking up on the signal. But what happens to the north with the safrinha crop is still going to be something we're going to talk quite a bit about. And at the end of this week, we're going to have some brand new long-range weather forecast model data that's going to take us out months. We're going to take a close look at that and analyze it. But this gets you at least through the next couple of weeks, all the way out to mid-February, with an idea about what we're watching. And I'll wrap it up there and talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.